Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is going to be all the projects I have on my needles. Sort of. I have 35 projects on my needles right now. 3 of those I will not be showing today. Not because I don't want to, but because they're still in Austria. So they're my kind of super big chunky projects with big needles, thick yarn, and considering the size of the yarn in the project, it's the equivalent of 2 projects with thinner yarn, and I was I'd rather bring those with me to Germany. So I don't have those 3 projects, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of share them at some point in the future, and they probably will be something I'll finish in Austria, maybe bring them over when they're done, I don't know yet. But so I've got 3 projects in Austria which I will not be showing. But behind me you can see my 32 projects. I haven't actually counted them. I know it's 32 because of the Excel spreadsheet I keep. And I'm pretty sure I double check to make sure all the projects are here. But it could be, so feel free to keep count, or maybe I'll count them when I do the editing for this video. And I might have to eat my words because maybe it's not 32, maybe I miscounted. But it should be 32. Yes, so I did kind of film some little bits at the beginning, just me collecting together my whips. And I then realised when I sat down to film my German video, I filmed a little clip, of the sofa. I then moved everything down as I was talking about it. And so now it's not going to be in exactly the same position, so you're going to get that awkward cut of this is what the sofa looked like, and now it looks completely different. So if anyone's wondering why this all changed, that's why. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk through all of the projects I have on my needle. This isn't going to be a video where I talk about, will I frog it, will I finish it, will it become stay a languishing whip. I plan on finishing all of these at some point in my life. I don't really frog projects. I've talked about this a few times before. Not because I have anything against frogging projects. It's more the sort of person I am. I've thought so much about the project, the yarn, that by the time I cast on, it just doesn't make sense for me to then frog it, because if I frogged any of these projects right now, I know eventually I'll cast them on again to be exactly what they currently are becoming. So if I frog them, I'm frogging them just because I want less projects on my needles, but then getting rid of my progress, so I might as well just keep them on my needles and it's fine. So sadly, it's not one of those videos, though I love watching them. It's so fascinating to see some of the things people have on their needles and how they kind of, their tastes change and things like that. And my tastes change as well, but not, I don't know, not typically with, by the time I've started a project, I already know I'm going to want this for a really long time. I don't know. My tastes change, but they sort of don't. I don't know what I'm saying. But, so I'm obviously going to be sharing a lot of projects, and I'm going to try not talk about each one too long. It's more of this is what it is, this is where I started, because all of these you should have heard about in my podcast before, or will hear in my next podcast, which I'll be filming very soon after this. And yeah, so it's not going to be very informative. It's more just, I've had people ask, like, how many projects do you have on the needle? Do you actually work on all of them? That's kind of what I'm trying to answer in this video today. So, you know, if you want to work on something while I ramble, that is always nice. And I always like hearing what you're working on. So if you are working on something while you're watching this video, please let me know in the comments. And as much as I hate saying it, please subscribe. It sounds really, I don't know, I hate saying it, but it is just sort of heartbreaking when you check like YouTube analytics. I try not to check them too often because it can just make you feel weird about yourself and what you're doing. But you know, when people watch your videos and you're like, why did you not subscribe? And it helps, because I quite often get people who then will message me or would leave a comment and be like, oh wow, how did I not know you have a YouTube channel? And you know, how did your videos never get recommended to me? And it all depends on the whole like liking the video, subscribing, commenting, all that stuff. But I try not to do the whole like, please do those things too often. I just thought I'd mention it now. And for me, the comments are more, it feels like instead of me just sitting here talking to myself, I get something back of kind of like, you've engaged with my video, you have something to say, and have a little bit of a conversation in the comment section. That's how I like it. I'd really appreciate it if you left a comment. Either, I'd love to hear how many projects you have on the needles. This video will probably make a lot of people feel really good about their number of whips. If you want to compare, you're welcome to. And, how many projects you have on the needles, what you're currently kind of working on while watching this. And, I just want to hear something, so I'm not just by myself. Let's get started, because we have a lot of projects to get through. 32, in fact. Unless, like I said, I've miscounted. Ooh, my tea is stuck to my coaster. My coaster is stuck to my tea. One of those. I'm just going to randomly grab them and talk about them, because that is the easiest thing to do. This is a newer cast on and a very sporadic random cast on. This is the, I think it's called Almina cowl from Worsted, as in the book Worsted by Amy of La Bien-Aimée. And I don't know, I can't really say I have a lot, but I have some of it done. And you can see I'm using quite bright, funky colours and a mixture of them. It's all Letalope. And this was just a project I decided to, randomly cast on, because I like that it's intarsia worked in the round. I've never done that. I've done intarsia once, maybe twice, but never in the round. So I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And I have quite a bit of just random bits of Letalope that a friend of mine actually gave me, who actually has her own podcast. It's Laura from The Lonely Knitter, and YouTube apparently now introduced a thing that you can actually have like handles like with Instagram and actually tag people with them. So if someone, mentions me in a video, I'll now actually know that, and I can mention people specifically. I don't know if it's like fully fleshed out and rolling out yet, but I know that's a thing. But at EOAF in March, she gave me quite a few scraps of Letalope, some like full skeins as well, which was amazing of her, because I think she'd made one thing already with the yarn and was like, this is scratchy, it's not for me. And I was like, I love Letalope. And so she gave it to me, which is so nice of her. And yeah, so you have to kind of work these stripes and everything before the intarsia starts. And I think I'm a few rows away from the actual intarsia now. And I think I'm using one extra colour than what is called for in the pattern, just because I was like, I want to try and use as much as I have. But yeah, so that's, I think actually, it's not my newest cast on, but one of my newest ones, which I think I haven't actually shown in a podcast yet. And that's something I'm just occasionally working on, typically in the evenings when I'm kind of getting ready. I've like got ready for bed and I'm winding down for the evening. That's one of the projects that I'll typically work on. Just like a round or something. So it's growing very slowly. Then in my bag of holding, If you're a D&D fan, then, this will mean something to you. Is a project where I have very little to show. This is the Cozy Classic Light by Jessie May. So I'm not even done with the ribbing yet. It's done with quite small needles because it's meant to be fingering weight yarn held single. I cast this on because after I finished my No Sweatshirt test knit for Park Williams, where I was holding Hulse Coast double, I wound the rest off the cone and found I had like 120 or something like that grams left. And I was like, I want to use this. I need to find a project immediately. And I figured out that it would be enough to make a Cozy Classic Light. Can't remember if I have to make it short sleeved or not, but I'm going to do the body length that I want and then put what I have left in the sleeves. And yeah, it's quite small needles. And especially the ribbing, it's just, you obviously use smaller needles for the ribbing. And so it's just been a bit of a pain getting this done. And I cast this on a few months ago now in the summer. I was really hopeful to make some progress on it, and then it just never really became a thing I worked on because I had so many other things to work on. So this is a project that is currently hibernating because it's not high on my list of priorities, and it's also not something I'm going to be able to wear until pretty much the summer because it's Hulse Coast, so it's got quite a bit of cotton in it. So it's more of like I think we're already past the like transitional stage of autumn here in Germany. And it's going to be more for like when spring turns into summer. So this is hibernating. But I was kind of sort of like the cowl that I just showed. It was also one of those projects where I occasionally would just pick it up and do like a couple of stitches or do a round. And this bag, I don't think I've ever shown before. A friend of mine actually got this for me. Jess, who dyes yarn under the name Skein in the Stitch. After I had my Viva and had moved to Germany, she sent me a lovely little parcel with like a few like goodies from the UK and included this lovely bag and stitch markers and things like that. It was really nice of her. So that's the second one. Then we have an oldie. I know what's in here because it's one of the projects I'm trying to actively work on. This is the Novice cardigan, like chunky edition I think it's called, by Petite Knit. Which I've shown off plenty of times in my podcast now. And I've got both sleeves done and just need to work the body now. And the yarn I'm using is Feeling Good yarn by Wool and the Gang. This is my main colour. And I'm holding it with some Surrey alpaca, which is Cumulus by Fibre Spates. And for the cuffs and like the neckband and stuff, I have one skein of this darker red of the same Feeling Good yarn, which is actually a perfect match for the Surrey, but I only had, like I said, one skein, and this main red was a frogged jumper that I'd made in 2019. I think I started it in 2019 and finished it in 2020 because I think... can't remember, no, maybe it was end of 2019. Either way, and the fit wasn't good. There were no short rows or any sort of shaping, and so I was like, I'm going to frog it, find something else, and then was like, I'm going to try and make this. So it was hibernating for quite a while, but then became one of those projects that I was like, no, I really want to try and get this finished, because I think it's going to be a beautiful, soft and warm piece to wear, and a bright, pop of colour in winter and autumn. So I think I'll have enough to finish the body and do the ribbing and the contrast colour like I've done everywhere else. I just don't know if I'm going to have enough yarn for the button band. And ordering this yarn to Germany isn't exactly fun because it's a UK based company. I think there might be a couple of places where you can order it within the EU, but it's also just not that cheap, and I'd rather not buy yarn, but I do want to get this project done. So this is one I'm currently working on quite a lot because I want to get it done. And I typically have out of my 32 works in progress right now, I typically have 10 that I focus on at a given time. The most, but I'll still occasionally work on the other ones. And that's currently one of my main focus projects. And so is this one. So this is the Forager by Melody Hoffman. I talked about in my podcast video how angry and annoyed I am at this pattern, because there's just quite a few mistakes in there and I had to recalculate a lot of things, and I might as well have not bought the pattern and just used my gauge. So that's frustrating. But I did have one sleeve finished before, but I went back and changed because the sleeve was just too wide. And I'm now back to working on the body before I do another sleeve. And I haven't worked on this the last few weeks really, because like I said, I've had other projects I've been focusing on. But it is one of my Make 9 and I'm trying to get this done before the end of the year. And it's also my easiest project that I currently have on the needles. So it's just if I'm, doing anything where I'm like, I'd like to knit, but I also want to concentrate on what I'm doing, then this is a project I can easily work on, because, especially with the body, like you're just going round and round, just stuck in it. And I'm using yarn from Woolly Knit. This is Diggle DK, in the colour Rust Nip. And I should have plenty of yarn. I used 1.5 skeins for the sleeve, which I have left. I've got this skein and then 3 more for the body, and I think that should be plenty. So, not stressed about it. Not yet, at least. So that is a project that has been high priority and knit a lot on it. Then it kind of like dropped down and became occasionally, and then it's kind of picking up again now. Ooh, it's not super old, but it's one of my older projects. This is the mystery knit-along from Susanne Sommer, which happened last year summer, maybe even like springtime, called Brioche Mystery. I believe this is the front, I think. So hard to tell sometimes. So it's a shawl, and it's brioche mystery. And for the longest time... so it's done, I think it's like 4 or 5 clues, and this kind of like, can't really see it's a triangle, but it is a triangle of like this peachy orange colour. That was clue 1, and then you pick up stitches and start working this next bit. So I am on clue 2 now, which is an improvement for me, but it took me a really long time just to finish this first bit, because brioche is slow, which I do like. That's part of why I like knitting brioche. Oh, there's a mistake there. Oh well. But it does just mean it's slow going, so it can sometimes be not exactly the most motivating project when you just feel like you sit down for an hour and you're like, oh wow, I managed to do like 2 rows. But I do really love it, and it is something I enjoy working on occasionally because of the slower nature of brioche and having to pay attention and kind of looking at the pattern every row and things like that. The yarn I'm using is all from Cookston Crafts. So it was 4 skeins that I bought at some point from her. And you can kind of see like these 2 colours, there isn't a lot of contrast. There's also not a lot of contrast with this one. And I love low contrast, especially for brioche. Because with the 2 colour brioche, I don't like it when the contrast is real intense. I like the softness of it, that you can tell it's 2 different colours, but it's not completely obvious. And this green one is kind of like my pop of colour, really. And yeah, it's a slow going project for me, and at some point I will finish it because I think the design is absolutely stunning. But yeah, it's gonna take a while, and that's just the way it is, and I'm okay with that. Let's share this one because it's just a lone one. This is the Feldspar tee, which I'm knitting in Sandnes Garn Linne, and started this in August, I think it was. So it was a summer project because it's a summer yarn. It was a summer pattern, and I've made decent progress on it. So it's knit bottom up. I now just need to add as much length as I want before I split the front and the back, and then work the sleeves after that. It's just Not something I'm really going to work on now that it's colder, because now I'm like, ooh, woolly knits, want to get all those done. And this is something that will probably wait until next year, and I'm okay with that, I don't mind. But it is something that, so often for Christmas I head over to Dubai, because my parents live there, and so that could be something that I bring, because it could be nice to wear there. But I'm also happy for it just to kind of languish a bit until springtime. But it was something for quite a while when I was actively working on it over the summer, that it wasn't one of my main focus projects. It was more just occasionally when I wanted to change, I would work on it every now and then. And that, I should say, in some ways is what I have with most of my projects. So I have about 10 that I focus on. Within those 10, there's typically 2 or 3 that I'm mainly knitting on, and the other ones are more like, I want to change. Let's do a little bit on this. Let's do a little bit on that. And then for all the other projects that I'm not really focusing on, it's typically on a Sunday that I'll get like the urge to cast on something new. And so that's when I allow myself to work on something like the brioche mystery, where there's not even a slight pressure to try and get that done, because it's not a test knit, it's not a present, and I do a lot of kind of knitting for other people. So there's no pressure there, and I like saving those projects for Sunday. So instead of casting something new on, I then work on one of my old projects, which feel like a new cast on because I rarely work on them. And so it's on that Sunday that I'll kind of start to rotate through all of my projects. So for the most part, my 32 projects do all see some action every month, and it's really just a few where I'd have to constantly like switch needles between projects, where one of them will kind of languish a lot more, and it'll be like a whole season before I pick it up again. But I have very few projects that actually will sit for like a whole year untouched. I don't think I have any projects like that, because I think I've worked on all of them already this year. But doesn't mean I do a lot. But occasionally, I'll pick it up and work a bit, and then I'm like, nope, I'm done now. This is a project from this year. This is the blanket I'm working on, called From Grandma with Love, and I've got this one square. And I'm using the Mystery Sock Club from Georgie of the Fiber Fox. Is this the one? Yep. So I ordered the mini skein set every month. So it's 5 skeins, but I've used one already because this is the January colour to make the square here. And I have this much left of that particular square. So it uses a decent amount, but leaves enough yarn to then still be able to, put it into a scrappy project, which I really like. So I now have months January through to July, and because of advents and yarn shows and a lot of other things, Georgie and Ben have been putting a pause on their monthly club, and it will be after advents are kind of shipped out that they'll open the orders for like the other months. So it will be coming. I was like, Georgie, please don't, I need to finish this blanket at some point in my life. And she's like, don't worry, those colours will be coming. It just won't be on time anymore. And I was like, makes perfect sense, when things get stressful, something's got to give. And the Mystery Club is a perfect thing to just kind of leave for a while. So after finishing when I had that first square on the needles, I did work on it quite often. Not for like long periods of time. It was more just, work like one row of the lace chart or something. And now I'm at the point where I need to cake up my next mini skein, and that is the only thing preventing me from working on my next square. So I just need to do it. And I hate caking up yarn. I already hated it before I had like a yarn winder and Swift. I hated like caking or like winding up my yarn so it was usable. But now even with a like winder and Swift, I'm like, I still hate it. And when I stayed with Georgie and Ben when I was in the UK, Georgie and I were like planning some socks and things, and she was like, oh, let's go wind up the yarn. And I was like, ugh, I hate it. And she was like, yeah, but I have like an electric automatic like winder. And I was like, yeah, but still you have to put the yarn on the Swift, and then you have to cut the ends, and then you have to thread it through the winder. True, But then it just did its thing, and I was like, okay, I'm converted. This is amazing. But I have no reason to buy one of those because they're expensive. But, you know, if I just have an actual, like, set myself an hour, you know, every weekend or something, or every, like, once in a month, where I wind up multiple things, then I don't have this problem all the time. It also is the one thing that prevents me from, like, constantly casting on new things. This is why I've been knitting a lot more commercial stuff, because you don't have to wind up the yarn. In this beautiful project bag with badges, this is from the Fibre Fox. I have got a pin on here. Cute little pin from Georgie. I think it's just it's a standard one. Is the first ever blanket. No, I've made 2 blankets before. One was a proper sized one, but it was really big wool, like chunky wool. And the other one was more of like a lap blanket. This is my first scrappy blanket. And this is the Happy Scrappy Blanket, I believe it's called. And it currently looks like this. So I'm getting the width that I want, slowly but surely. My favourite bit still is just this beginning. I love it so much. It's so beautiful. It's knit with fingering weight yarn held double. Obviously you can use DK to do this, but it was intended for kind of fingering weight scraps so you can marl it together. So you still get these kind of stripes, but they're not as intense as if you were using just like DK weight yarn. I'm using 3.5mm needles, which does create a very thick, squishy and dense fabric, and it's going to be so lovely and warm. I just need more width. So the way that it's done is I'm currently working increases until, oh gosh, how do I show this off? Until this is as wide as I want the blanket to be. Now it is garter stitch, so I know it has a little bit of like stretch in it, but I do want a really big cozy blanket, especially because I knit quite a lot with fingering weight yarn, and so I have a decent amount of scraps in here, but with a lot of projects that I finish, I end up getting more and more and more of this yarn, and so I know I'll have plenty to knit this blanket. And in the project bag right now, at first I think I wanted to make it just hand-dyed yarn, and then I was like, this is ridiculous, I'm just using whatever fingering weight yarn I have. And these are all the scraps I have for the blanket from 2019, 2020 and 2021, I think. So a lot of it I've already knit up. Occasionally I'll also dive in here if I need like a contrast colour for something. I'll check here first if I've got anything and use that before I kind of wind up more yarn. So there's a lot of like different sized amounts, which is perfect because I like to hold one strand of yarn where I have a lot for like multiple different colours, and so I use a lot of one and then the small amounts with that. So right now I'm using this one, which is an opal yarn, where I have a lot of it left and probably could have made another pair of socks, but I was like, no, it's okay, I've got more of this yarn. And then this is a Zauberball from Shopperwolle, and you can just see I don't have a lot of it left, so this will be done while I still have a lot of this left, and I'll keep using small amounts, and then when I only have a small amount of this left, I'll magic knot on a big amount of yarn again and just keep kind of cycling through it that way. It just kind of ensures that it doesn't come across too well on camera because it kind of just looks stripy. But I think it's like all the way through here, I'm holding the same yarn with different like minis, like small scraps. And then eventually I kind of change and once again hold that for a really long time. It just helps to make the stripes less like super intense. But yeah, so that's my blanket, which hasn't seen a lot of love this year because it wasn't in Germany with me until like June, July, maybe earlier, I can't even remember. And it's also one of those projects where it will be one that I kind of pick up more on a Sunday. Scrappy Sunday is a thing. And because I'm in no rush to finish it, it's also, I typically work on other things instead, and my plan is to, that bag I showed of the scraps, I want to work through all of that before I start putting in new scraps, because I want to use the old stuff first, and then I can put the scraps I've been keeping in another bag in here once I've worked through all of those. What next? Oh, another blanket. Because you can never have too many blankets on the go, apparently. I started with like one, would finish it, another would finish it, started this one, was like, this will be my one blanket, and then it just grew. So this is also a project bag from Georgie. I mainly have project bags from Georgie. Though, this one here, which has my From Grandma with Love blanket with yarn from Georgie, the Fibre Fox. This bag was actually gifted to me by Jess from Skein in the Stitch when I was helping out at Yarndale, because I saw this one and I think she only had one in this colour, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, I love how grungy it is, and she was like, take it. We had a stressful time with setup, but I might talk about that in a future video. So in here I have what I've been calling my friendship blanket. So it's not super wide, it definitely is like a blanket more for like one person, but I'm planning on making it quite long, and I'm not using a pattern for it. It's just, I looked online, I was like, how do you do a ripple stitch and crochet? And just did it. Just chained stitches until I thought the length was going to be, like the width was going to be okay. And then just always worked 4 rows of each colour, and they're all 20-gram minis. And there was never a lot left of each colour. It was enough to like make a couple of snowflakes from Cookston Craft, which I've shared before. And the first set here was from Skein in the Stitch. It was her friendship fade, what inspired this whole blanket. And I've started the first row of my next set of minis, which are from Georgie of the Fibre Fox. I have a lot of yarn. I do knit a lot with it. It's also in a lot of projects where I'm very slow to make progress. And it's also how I just randomly pick these. And I have just a couple of different mini sets from people. So I was talking about Laura of the Lonely Knitter earlier. So this is some yarn from her back when she was still called Bumbling Yarns. She's had a rebrand, and it's so beautiful. Then I've got more from Georgie. I've got some more from Jess. I've got some from Adventures in Yarncraft. I've got yarn from Len when he died on the Frog and the Fish, but he's currently taking a break from dyeing. I've got some minis from Waku yarn, maybe, or is it just scraps from Waku yarn? But it's just going to be minis or scraps from hand dyers who I'm friends with. That's it. And it's quite funny because originally I had like a certain number of dyers, and then slowly over like the last year I've become friends with more of them, and I'm like, oh, well, now I have to include your minis in my blanket. What an awful problem to have. Here is... Oh, and I should say I started that. I think when I moved to Germany, just before moving to Germany last year. So I've been working on it quite a while and hasn't seen a lot of action over the last few months, but crochet is something I tend to prefer to do in the colder times. Knitting I'll do all the time, but crochet I'm like, no, we'll do it in autumn, winter. This is another crochet project. I'm not even sure if I've shown this off on my channel. It's just going to be a little bucket bag. This comes from one of the like pattern booklets, magazines that Sandnes Garn releases. I really like them. It is frustrating that you can only buy them if you buy some yarn from them. Originally, I always read it as you had to buy like the yarn to make one of the projects from the booklet to be able to buy the booklet. You just have to buy like at least one skein of their yarn and then you can buy the booklet. But I'm using the exact same yarn as what was in the pattern, even the same colour. This is Mandarin Petite by Sandnes Garn, not that you can really see the label. And I'm holding a double. I think I'm using a 4mm crochet hook, and it's really simple. You just do increases, then you kind of like just work into the back loop, and then you just keep doing single crochet all the way around until you have the height that you want. And then I think there's a couple of extra bits you have to do as well. It looked a lot more complicated in the pictures, and if I had known how simple it was, I still am glad I bought the booklet because there's some beautiful other patterns in there, but this one, it wasn't worth it for this pattern alone. And I'm almost through my first 2 skeins, and then I have 3 more, so I think I'll have plenty to finish this. And it's also one of those things where started, I think, springtime, and have just slowly kind of occasionally picked it up when I want something really easy and mindless, but I can't really crochet without looking, because especially with cotton, especially 2 strands, like I miss some of the strands of the cotton if I don't pay attention. So it's one of those like mindless, but I want to pay a little bit more attention than normal. That's one of the projects that I'll work on, and it's just slow going, really slow going. Oh, so many. Well, we're going to go for another crochet, and it's going to be another blanket. This is my Battenberg blanket, which is another scrappy blanket that I'm working on. This is with all my like DK worsted weight yarn. I'm kind of treating them the same for this blanket, and just blocking my squares out so they're all going to be the same size. So I do have them here. So here are some of the squares that I've made where I've woven in the ends, I've blocked them, chopped off the ends, and you can maybe just see what I mean. So this is a DK merino silk blend from Wild Atlantic Yarns, and this is I think it's 100% Romney from the fiber company. I think the base is called Law, and they are not exactly the same size. This one is a bit bigger because this is more of a worsted weight yarn. This is more of a true DK. But I'm hoping when I actually come to join them, I can kind of fudge it a bit, and I'm not too fussed about it. I just really wanted to use up some of these scraps. So I have it's a lot, a small little bag of squares that I finished, but I haven't woven in the ends and block them. That is something I need to do soon, because I finally now have yarn to make my kind of main color, base color for the blanket. So it's inspired by a Battenberg cake. So you're meant to have like a skein of one color, then a kind of main color, and then another contrast color, and it just kind of alternates like that. And for a long time I was just like, I have no idea what yarn I'm going to use as a main color. You could obviously just go completely scrappy, but I was like, no, it's going to be like too much scrappiness. So I eventually settled on Peruvian Highland wool from Filcolana. This is the color Marzipan. So it's like, it's not white. It's a sort of cream with a little bit of beiginess. I love this color. And whenever I've been kind of placing orders online for yarn that I need for a project I'm currently working on, I'll typically add like a skein of this yarn into my order, just to kind of not immediately go out and buy, I don't know how many skeins I'm even going to need, but go out and buy 10 skeins and then it take a really long time until I work through them. And by just buying them occasionally, I can kind of start to work through each skein one at a time, and then be able to judge it a bit better. And if the dye lot isn't the same, it doesn't really matter because you're always alternating them. So I've got 2 in my main color now, 2 squares, and ends are woven in. I just need to block them now. I think a lot of people make this blanket so that they combine all the squares and then they weave in the ends and block it, if they block it at all. But because I'm using yarn where sometimes it's more DK and a bit thinner, sometimes it's more like worsted weight yarn and quite thick, I kind of need to block them to make it easier to join them so there's not too much puckering. So that's why I've been doing that. And it's also just, I think they look nicer when they've been like washed and blocked. So I'm hoping to actually start joining this soon, because then I'm hoping it will motivate me to keep making squares, because currently it's more of like when I'm like, oh, I want something to do, and it's a quick thing to make one of these squares. It doesn't take too long. I don't need the pattern anymore. I think I'm using a 4mm hook for this. And so it is just really nice that you sit down and, you know, in a couple of, I don't know how long it takes me, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I have no idea. I should time myself at some point. But, you know, in a short period of time, you can make one of these squares, and you started a project, finished a project. And I like this blanket for that, because when I'm having a like tough time with all the projects I've got, feel like I'm not finishing anything, sitting down and making a square just feels like you've accomplished something. It's like small goals, you know, leading to the bigger goal at the end. So I do kind of want to start joining it, and that does mean I have to just weave in ends and block all of these and make more of these. So I currently have 3 skeins untouched and 1 that I made those 2 squares from. And that's probably where I'm going to leave it for a while, until I work through all of these and start joining it. But like I said, unless I place an order for something, and often it's like, oh, if I add just 1 skein of this, I get free shipping, and I know I need this yarn in the future anyway. So then I kind of add one in, and it just spreads the cost a bit. But so my DK scraps are just in here. DK worsted. So for example, I've got Peruvian Highland wool again, but in the juicy green colorway, which I used for my test knit of the Love Magic dress. So I was trying to figure out for quite a while what to do with this. I think it would be enough for like a hat beanie, but I'm not exactly sure I need this color. Like getting it to work with the rest of my wardrobe, I was like, nah, it can go in here. I've got yarn from the Humlebee shawl that I made for my mum at the beginning of the year. This was a West Yorkshire Spinners yarn that I used to make a friend of mine a baby kimono for her baby. This is left over from the Spice cardigan I made for a friend of mine. Here's the other color. So it's just, I try to put the scraps in here as soon as I kind of have decided, okay, it can't be anything like substantial, so let's just put it in here. And that's why it's also handy that it's such a big project bag, which my mum bought for me, and I really love it. So another blanket. Oh, it's getting tricky now with the projects without project bags. This one, I'm so close to being done. The only sad thing about this one is there isn't a pattern for it. So this was something I started springtime last year, I think it was. It was a test knit for Lerga of Fiber Tales. She was calling it her basket sweater. And I was so happy to be chosen for the test knit because I love the design. I love all her designs and her videos, and I just think she's incredible. And it ended up being that I was almost done with the yoke and ready to split for sleeves, separate sleeves and body. And there were just issues with, some people were already done, were saying there's issues with the fit. I was having constant issues with the stitch count, that the increases didn't work out, so I had to rip back, redo them and recalculate them. And I had to recalculate them because Lerga had a grader, but was having kind of issues with them coming back with a fix, and then we were like, but it doesn't work. So she was paying someone who just wasn't doing their job, and eventually she was just like, I need to put this test knit on hold, it's too much, it's too stressful, and she was just like, can't deal with it now, but hopefully I'll be able to pick it up again in the future. And it was a month or 2 ago that I kind of went, it doesn't look like she's going to be able to do this anytime soon, and I've had this on the needles for a long time and I want to wear it. So I just kind of used the most up-to-date version of the pattern, calculated myself, given my gauge, how much ease do I want, and kind of just calculated how to work the final increase section, and then how to split for sleeves to make sure it all kind of looks nice and works out. And that's just what I've done. So the body is done, first sleeve done, And now I'm just on the ribbing for the second sleeve. So this might get done today, actually. But it was a project, like I said, that I hadn't touched in months and months because, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Because I was like, if she kind of chooses to pick up the tested again, I didn't want to have to frog a whole load of it because I made my own decisions about how it would look. But now that it's been, I think like a year and a half or something, I was like, nah, it's fine. If she does a test knit again, I'm sure she'll have to kind of do it from scratch and not get the people back who did it before unless they want to reapply. But I was like, either way, I'm going to have a beautiful jumper that hopefully people can make in the future. So I'm thinking about contacting her and being all like, look, I'm happy to help free of charge because I am looking into getting into tech editing and grading just as kind of like a side thing because it's something I enjoy doing and part of the reason why I test knit. So it'd be nice to actually build up a little portfolio and make it part of like my career, but not full-time career, just part-time. So I was thinking about kind of going over some of the problems that people mentioned, fixing that, getting in contact and being like, look, I've done this. If you want to use it, go for it. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. But I love it. I love it so much. And it's such an autumn project. So that one will be done soon. And it really has just been over the last month and a bit that I've been working on it to try and get it just done because I was like, it's just been on my needles too long. Which is funny because I have other projects that have been on the needles for longer. But it clearly shows like it's 5mm needles. And it's just so much fun to work with a little bit of like color work that you have. Didn't say. The yarn is from Snelden. It's a 3-ply, so I think they class it as like a sport DK. I don't know. To me, I think it's more of a DK because of the gauge you can knit it up to, but it's beautiful yarn. Then the next project is not the one I thought it was, so we're okay. I don't have to admit my shame just yet, though this is still a bit shameful. This is the Poet Shawl by Sari Nordland. If you've seen, I'll include pictures anyway, but if you've seen anyone who's knitted it or if you've seen the actual pictures, it's huge. The final thing is huge. And you need a lot of yarn for it. So I decided last year, my advent calendar from Georgie from 2021 was going to become the Poet Shawl. So I'm just on day 2 because I very quickly had to make a decision to be all like, I have other things I need to work on. This can't be my priority. And I have finished my 2020 advent project. Spoilers, actually, because I think I haven't shown that off finished on my podcast yet. Well, you get a little... Well, you're not going to see it, but you get to know it's done. So I've done that now, and I'll go into it in a podcast video, but I probably won't be getting my advent calendar from Geordie this year. I'll probably get it next year. Multiple reasons, and like I said, I'll go into it in another video. But so what I thought is like, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm only on day 2 of this. I haven't even like, you'll be able to maybe see the transition. I've done like a few rows of it. I'm like, I have an advent calendar to work on. It's okay if I can't get my one for this year. So that was one I worked on a little bit beginning of this year, and then it just got completely abandoned and will be completely abandoned until December. And I've got some beautiful pin badges. So my mum made this little project bag. It's even got like little flowers on there. But this is from Ducky Darlings, and this is Sissy Wolle, who has a wonderful German podcast, and she's from Austria, and I've actually met her. And it was really lovely. Did I want to say anything else about that? The next project is a relatively new cast on, and it's the Fall Stardew Valley socks. They have a different name, but I can't fully remember. And this is how much I have. I love these so much. So Stardew Valley, if you're not aware, is a video game that you can play, and it's all like, the design of it is all like pixelated, so it works perfectly as stitches. And you do have quite a few places. I think for most of the sock, you're using 3 colours in a row. And it needs a lot of different colours, which you'll see in the picture. So originally, when I saw the pattern, immediately bought it. There's one for each season. My plan is going to be, originally it was going to be knit the pair each season. But I think what I might actually do is knit a single sock each season. And then I can always, if I want matching pairs, do the same thing the following year. But as soon as I saw them, bought all those 4 patterns, and then was like, okay, let's go online. I'll probably use Arvetta Classic. Started putting everything in my cart, and then I went, no, hang on. I know we're really excited to make these, but surely with all the sock yarn and fingering weight yarn I have, I must be able to get these out of scraps because you don't need a lot of each colour. Lo and behold, yes, I can do it just out of the things I have in my stash. So some of these are like leftover skeins of Filcolana Arvetta. Then some of these are mini skeins from Georgie, for example. This is a leftover like Cascade Heritage sock yarn. This is a leftover from Ducky Darlings. So I was just like, I'm okay just using, you know, what I have and getting close enough to the colours that, you know, it's fine. Because I'm never going to get exactly the same colours because it's knit picks, and I think they ship to the UK, but I don't think they ship to Germany. It's just not worth the tax anyway. So this is a newer cast on, and it's one I've been loving working on, but it is one where I'm like, Nina, you shouldn't be working on this. So I've not really allowed myself to work on it as much as I wanted to. And I'm okay with that. It's just going to be a, you know, probably one of those projects on Sunday where I'll occasionally pick it up, do a round or 2, and that's that. And then eventually they'll grow and be done. But yeah, really excited for these. Love them so much. So pretty. A shameful project next. It's even been abandoned to a plastic bag. That's always sad. This is the Satsuki by Sari Nordland, which is one of my Make 9s, and it hasn't grown. Hasn't grown in a really long time. I started this, so the yarn itself is Lana Grossa. This top one is Ikapuno. This one is Brigitte number 3, which I got in the local yarn shop in Griesheim where I live. And there's potential like life things coming up over the next few months. Once again, I'll discuss it in the future, but there is a chance that I might not be living in this town for much longer, so it'd be nice to finish this before I leave. So, and because it's one of my Make 9s anyway, I want to try and get it done as soon as possible. And I think once I get past the working flat bit for the like drop shoulder kind of construction at the top and join in the round, I think it's going to fly by. When I was working on this at first, I have worked on it like multiple times. It's slow going because this is the back piece. So you have a lot of stitches and you're just working back and forth. No increases, no decreases, nothing. And I just wasn't really keen on purling at the time when I last worked on this. That has sort of changed. It was sort of the novice cardigan by Petite Knit that sort of changed my feelings with purling, and I started to kind of like it a bit more. I've never hated it. It's just always been quite slow, but yeah, so my plan currently, if you've watched my previous video about my fall knitting plans, autumn knitting plans, I do want to try and finish my 3 Make 9s that I currently have on the needle, but I think I'm currently going to try and focus on getting the forager done. Then I think my time will be split between this one and the Sparky that I'm still working on. So this one's only been on the needle since kind of the beginning-ish of the year. I think it is since like January or something, and I just really haven't been working on it. But hopefully it'll be one I work on soon again. I think this is my newest cast on. Yes, it is. So while I was in the UK, I ended up staying with Georgie and Ben of the Fibre Fox for a couple of days. And of course I was surrounded by beautiful yarn. And of course I was like, even though I saw them at Yarndale, I didn't really buy anything. It was so busy. I did buy yarn at Yarndale, but I knew I was going to see them, so I was like, I don't have to get it now. I can, look at when there's peace and quiet and I'm staying at the house. But I knew at Yarndale I was on the hunt for some yarn for the hibernation socks. I've wanted to make them for a really long time, and then I finally just decided, because I kind of forgot about it at Yarndale. Like I said, it was really busy. I then was looking at yarn in Georgie's little, it's not that little, the room where all the yarn is that she's already dyed up. And I found a skein of Winter Solstice on her Suri base. And this is Plumpy, my favourite base that she does, in the colour Poison. And I was like, this is very different for me. I like purple, but I never really knit with it all that much. So I've just started the cuff where you hold the Plumpy with the Suri. And then eventually the rest of the sock is just knit with the Plumpy. And it's just a slow going kind of thing. I'm like, just a cozy, easy project, nothing too stressful, that I'm slowly just working on. And it's just absolutely lovely. So soft and squishy. They're going to be amazing socks for when it gets really cold. So they'll probably take a while until they're both done, because it's a project where I'm not really rushing myself, and it will just be every now and then I'll just, pick it up, work on it a bit, and no stress with that one. Then, this is the shameful project. We've got one attached. This is one of my Make 9 from last year. So last year, my Make 9 challenge was not that successful. I finished one. This is the second one that I started, and I didn't get very far. So these are the Brilliant Liz socks. The yarn is by Lucy Locketland, and she also designed the pattern, inspired by a friend of hers who sadly passed away. So I started them last year, I think autumn time maybe, or end of summer. And you can see I got past doing the heel. Don't even have the needles on here anymore, and I just need to do the foot. And this colorwork chart just isn't the easiest. It was also, at the time when I was making these, I was still relatively new to colorwork, and so it wasn't the most relaxing thing to work on. Whereas now I think I'm gonna have no problem, especially not with the second one. I'm actually kind of excited to just knit the second one, and part of me is tempted to completely start over with these, because I think my tension and everything will change a lot. So I might start the second working from the inside of each of these cakes of yarn. So I think these are both 50 grams and this is 20, maybe. So all hand dyed by Lucy, and yeah, it's one I literally haven't picked up since I last worked on it in last year, whenever that was. Last year? Yes, last year. But they just haven't had much love. And I think it is because I just should start the second one, see how the leg works up. If they look like they're going to be the same, finish one of them, finish the second one. But if it looks like the second one looks much better, or looks very different to the first one, I'll frog the first one and then just keep working from start all over again. So that is a project that just never got picked up, really, ever. I think I've got a couple of projects in here. Yes. This is my sort of abandoned project bag. So there's not much to see. It's on a really tiny cable because it just shows I haven't worked on it. But it will be the Fier cardigan by Fiber Tales, and it's so hard to show because the yarn's quite dark. But you can see there's this beautiful detail down here. And so this is the back piece. This is going to be for a friend of mine. And it's just one of those things where I just either never have the motivation to work on it because it's really slow going and worked flat. So there's, once again, a lot of purling. But though there are some fun details that you kind of work. But yeah, slow going. The yarn is Le Petit Lamb's Wool by BJ Bouche. And the dark burgundy grey, I believe the colour is. And it's just something that I knitted on Probably the last time was beginning of this year. Maybe. Otherwise it was end of last year. And it's just one of those projects where it's just not happening, but I still plan on doing that for that friend. And I'll get there eventually. Then I've got a sort of embarrassing project because I think I've done 2 rows. Or 3 rows, and I'm starting on like the 4th. This is the bare beginnings of the lotus petal top by Iris. So I've made one of these before. I test knitted the pattern for her back in August 2020, I think it was. And she ran a make-along over the summer to re-knit one of the patterns that you've already knit of hers. So this was the only one I'd already knit of hers, and I wanted another one anyway. I just didn't get very far. Other people did. I did not. The yarn is Holst Super Soft in the colour Parma. I have about 200 grams of this. More than enough for this top. And it is so it's work bottom up, and it does have a really beautiful lace design at the bottom. But I think it's just when I started this, it wasn't good timing, but I wanted to kind of join in to try and support Iris and not just promote her patterns, but also take part in this whole thing of let's not constantly buy the newest shiny pattern. Let's re-knit patterns that we've really loved in the past and kind of fight these sort of fast fashion trends that are slowly seeping into knitting. So, yeah, well, this is incredibly slow fashion. But I will work on it. It probably just won't be until next year. This is a project from No, I started it this year. Had to be this year. So this is knit using leftover yarn that I had after I finished the Crescendo blouse, which was a test knit for the Knit Pogo. This is the Honey Bucket Bag by Petite Knit. So it's got a like honeycomb brioche that you have to knit, and it's challenging. It's small needles. I'm using 2.25, but it's Sunday and tin silk mohair from Sandnes Garn, which I think I originally knit my jumper on like a 3.5 millimeter needles. Now I'm using 2.25 to try and get a really nice dense fabric, which I am getting, but it does make it hard on my hands to work on it. It's a bit painful. The brioche pattern as well isn't the easiest to kind of work on, but I just need to kind of keep working on it slowly until I get the height that I want. I thought I heard thunder. Nope. Yeah, it's just slow going, and it is one of those ones that I'll occasionally pick up on a Sunday to work on. And it's beautiful, but it takes so long. And I think next time I maybe would want to use thicker yarn to be able to use thicker needles, but then you still have that issue of you want a dense kind of gauge. But that whole project bag was kind of things that just aren't getting a lot of love, but they will. If everything goes to plan with what I kind of said for my knitting plans for the rest of this year, it should be that a lot of these then get done early next year. Fingers crossed. It's all up to me. If I stick to my plan, then it'll be fine. This is one from Christmas last year that I started on the 1st of December. Wanted it to be done. My hair's just stuck to everything. I wanted it to be done for Christmas, but with going to Dubai and stuff and other things I was working on, it just didn't happen. So I'm actually hoping to work on this come December again and try and see if I can at least finish it for the new year. So this is a kit that I bought from Hillersvåg, which is a yarn company in Norway. This is their pattern. This is also their yarn. I can't remember what the name of the yarn is. I think it might be the Solja base, maybe. And it has a folded collar, which I still need to fold down and sew down. But you can hopefully see this beautiful like wintry design of the snow, these trees, and I have a little bit left of the tree before I go into a 1x1 color work, split for sleeves, and then it's just plain stockinette from there. So it's just been slow going because these single stitches I find really hard to do to keep my tension okay. And that's also the tricky part with the trees, that occasionally you just have one stitch for the tree and then you have to get to the next tree, and it just trying to figure out, should you catch your floats, should you just leave it? And I typically have the issue that my color work is too loose, not too tight, so that makes things a bit tricky as well. But I'm thinking, now making no promises, it's just something I'm thinking about, that I might give Vlogmas a go this year. I think it could be really fun, especially because there'll actually be Christmas markets and things like that on in Germany, which they weren't last year. And, you know, this could be one of the projects I work on along with the Advent, and so we'll see, but no promises. I was also thinking about maybe doing January instead, because YouTube just goes so quiet in January because so many people did Vlogmas that they need January to kind of recover. So we'll see. I'm just kind of thinking about it, or, you know, even just trying to post maybe a bit more in December. But yeah, so I would like to try and focus on this one come December again. And ideally, I'd want this and the Advent to be my only real projects that I kind of focus on. I think that's wishful thinking. I always work on way too many things and have too many things on. Speaking of having too many things on, this is one of my test knits. So this is the Pippin sweater by Sophie the Knit Pearl Girl. I'm showing you the back. I am using another yarn from Hillersvåg. This is Tinder, which is a sort of DK weight, 260 meters per 100 grams. And I had this in my stash. It was a yarn I bought like a month or two before I left the UK, when I was down in London and went to Knit with Attitude, who stocked this yarn. And I had a sort of rough plan of what to make, but then when this test knit came up, I was like, I'd signed up for it thinking I was going to use a different yarn, and then I was like, oh, but what about this one? And I love it so much. So you have this sand stitch that you work across the whole jumper, and I am almost done with the body now. You can see it's getting there, I think. So from the stitch progress keeper I have on here, which is a lovely little snowflake, from where this stitch marker is, I have 5.5 inches to do before I start the ribbing. So I think I'm at about almost 2.5. So we're getting there. I'm hoping this weekend that I'll finish knitting the body and doing the ribbing. And then next week I can start working on the first sleeve. And I should still have enough time to finish both sleeves and block it before the deadline comes up. I just had a lot of other test knits I was working on, and well, there's some issues and dramas, so this didn't really get any attention until beginning of this month, October, because with Yarndale and stuff, other test knits, them being at Yarndale where I couldn't knit much, and then it wasn't until after Yarndale was done that I really focused on this. So it's just been slow going. And speaking of test knits, this is one that should have been done, isn't done, but it's sort of okay, and I'll explain why. This is the Cosmo Cardigan by Rust Knitwear, and this was meant to be done 19th of September, I think, and everything was going well and I should have been able to finish it. But then the test knit was put on hold for reasons I'm not going to share, because I don't know if the designer wants them to be shared. Which is fine. Test knits end up being put on hold and cancelled. That is no problem. But then a lot of people were kind of, because she released the pattern in English and in German, had 2 separate test knit groups. I was in the German one. And people then kind of said to her, like, are you sure, we can try and help you to get the pattern out because you've put so much hard work in? So she was like, okay. I think it was like 3 or 4 days after she said she was going to cancel it. Sorry, no, actually, if you're happy to keep going, I would love it if we could try and finish it. And before she cancelled it, there were a few issues that had come up with this kind of like cable design that you have running down. Like, it runs down the front and then also goes down the sleeve. It's hard to show when it's not, like, on the body. You might be able to see it a bit. better here. But I'll include pictures, and it's really beautiful, but there were a few issues with the increases there. And then it took a while to sort that out. And then a lot of things ended up changing with the chart for my size. And so my cardigan, once it's completely finished, will look quite different to the actual size if you were to knit it now from the pattern now that it's released. That doesn't bother me. I'm not annoyed about that at all. And, you know, life happens. I'm not going to get annoyed for someone because I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm choosing to do this. And she was also very understanding about, you know, me not being able to finish it because of the kind of like delay with things. So all I made sure to do was, I've worked on it a little bit since the deadline passed. I made sure that I'd done half of the button band so that I could give an estimate of how much I would need to finish the whole thing. And I made sure to have one sleeve done to once again estimate how much I would need for the second sleeve to give an overall estimation of how much yarn I used for my size. The issue with that is it's not going to be exactly accurate because there's been quite a few changes in the yoke and with the increases and stuff, but it was better than having nothing. And I did take some like sneaky pictures of like just one side, but I'm hoping to like finish it and take some better pictures. But it's just I also don't want to try and promote this one too much because of how different it is. But I think it's a beautiful design. I definitely want to knit another one. And yeah, I'd really, you know, encourage people to give this pattern a try. The button band is done in double knitting, so it takes a long time. So you need to have patience. And that is why I still haven't been able to finish the second half of it. Like I think from the halfway point to here was a couple of hours over multiple evenings to try and get just that bit done. It's slow going, but it is worth it in the end. And it'll be beautifully warm for when it gets really cold. I'm knitting this single-stranded using Pletilope in the Ash Heather colorway. I mentioned in a podcast video that I had about 1 kilo of this yarn. I got it quite affordably from Iceland directly. And I thought it would be perfect for this test knit. So it's not done yet, but I kind of tried my best to fulfill, you know, like the duties of a test knitter. And it was just funny talking to the designer about like, I felt guilty I hadn't finished, she felt guilty that so much changed, and we just kept going back and forth and be like, I hope you don't think like badly of me. And so it's all good. We both feel guilty for different things, but we both just shouldn't really. Life just happens, things get in the way, and it's okay. This in here, I've got my pre-knit for Albiona McLaughlin. I mentioned I was going to do a pre-knit in my last podcast video. I just didn't mention who it was for because, oh, of course I just broke the yarn, so we might as well break them both off. Because I wasn't sure if what I could share and what I couldn't share. I think this pattern should be coming out at some point this month, but this is the Saglan pullover. At least that's how I'm pronouncing it. I've got a way too small cable on here. But it's a sort of, it's not even dropped shoulder. It's a like set in sleeve maybe, but you work it flat for a while. You're not able to see anything because the yarn's so dark, but it's worked flat for a while, and I've only just joined it in the round after all the shaping for like the back and the front, the sleeves, all of that. So I'm making slow progress on this. For the pre-knit, all I needed to do was post at least one progress picture before the pattern comes out, and it's not out yet from what I've seen, so I'm hoping to be able to work on it a bit more so you can see a bit more details about what's going on, because it was so hard to take a picture of this. But I love Albiona McLaughlin's patterns. She is so talented. I have quite a few of her patterns, especially because she does a lot of patterns specifically with Newtoden in mind. And that's what I'm using for this. So this is, I'm holding a double. And this dark green colour, I think is called like Skogsgra or something like that. I don't know the language. But this is one of the fiddliest colours of Nushaden I've ever worked with. It feels like you're working with air. And it's like, here you go, knit with some air. So even holding a double, it's not easy. Single-stranded, I don't even think you could work with it unless you just weren't trying to hit a particular gauge. It's challenging, but I kind of enjoy that. So it means with the construction and how it all works, you kind of have to go slowly because it's quite involved. Not challenging, it's just there's a lot to kind of keep track of in the pattern, but it's all perfectly well explained. And then combined with the yarn being so fragile, it really is like, it's my slow little knit. And I started that in September, I believe. So it hasn't been on the needles for long, and yeah, it's going to be so beautiful at the end though. That yarn is just stunning. This next one is also a blanket. It's not a scrappy blanket though. It's called the Shilling by Kate Davies. It's from a book I own by her. And there's quite a few patterns from a book that I'd really like to make. And I saw this and I was like, oh, one day I'm going to make this pattern. And then it kind of ended up being that I'd ordered some yarn from Yarn Home on Etsy. They're based in Lithuania. For a couple of different projects. And then it ended up being that one of the colours just didn't work out with the other ones that I had in mind. So I had some leftovers. And one of them was this like 1 kilo cone of this like brownish colour that just, it's almost like a hot chocolate colour, but like those hot chocolate mixes where it's like, this has nothing really to do with chocolate, it's just like a bit of cocoa powder, which, you know, I know is chocolate, but yeah, it's just a odd colour that just wasn't working in any of the garments I tried to use it in. So I was like, it can go into this blanket. And then I just had a couple of colours of just 100-gram skeins. So I think this is New Zealand lamb's wool, actually. And this is the first square, and I'm not very far yet. The chart is... There is obviously, like... Because... So much to say. So you start by casting on all the stitches for the square, and then you start to work decreases while also doing colour work. So you can see hopefully here, this will be a square and I'm just working slowly towards the middle. And then you make multiple squares, you join them together, and then you've got a blanket. So it's knit in the round, which is handy for colour work, but the chart is a bit tricky to keep track of, especially at this point where I still have quite a few stitches on the needles and it's just slow going. But whenever I do have an evening where I'm like, okay, I think I have some time to sit down and I feel like I can concentrate on this, I do typically sit at my table, like dining room table. It's not really like a proper dining room table. And I have like the chart laid out, and that helps make it a bit easier, but it's still not easy. So slow going. I can't remember when I cast this on. Maybe springtime. Something like that. And it's living in this beautiful bag that my mum got me. Yeah, so it's a different style of blanket to the other ones that I've shown. And it will just be one of those ones, sort of like the Grammar, from Grammar with Love. It's just going to be slow and we'll get there eventually. I've also just seen it's just getting darker and darker outside. So I hope it's going to be a bit more moody lighting. I haven't got many projects left, so I hope it's okay that we're powering through and just, you know, rolling with it. This next one is... It's not the oldest project I currently have on my needles, because I think the oldest one is the basket sweater? Maybe. But this is one that has been on the needles for quite a while. This is the Spring Intentions wrap by Kat Weaver. I think it was from last year, springtime, Spring Intentions. And it was just meant to be a very kind of like mindful, mindless knit. But at the time for me, it was constantly having to check the pattern to see, okay, what section am I up to, especially if the sections were short or if it was something that wasn't as intuitive. And I just wasn't in the right headspace every time I kind of tried to work on this. And I've been picking it up again over the last few months, and just occasionally working on it just a little bit to try and make some progress. And I am getting into it more now, but it's still slow going, and I think I'm almost halfway getting there. But there's still quite a way to go. And the yarn that I'm using is all Plumpy from the Fiber Fox. So these 3 are from her mystery sock club from 20... Was it last year? No, 2020, from 2020. And this is just a skein of Plumpy in, I think it's a Happy Accident colorway. So if I end up not having enough yarn to finish, or I get to a point where I'm like, I think this is getting tighter and tighter, I do have some other like single skeins of Plumpy that I wouldn't mind including in this, and I think they would work. So I was originally stressed I wouldn't have enough yarn because I didn't check my gauge before starting, and it's definitely loose. But now I'm not stressed about it anymore because I have other yarn I can just include, and I'm not going to stress about it. Ooh, we're getting there, last few. While we still... I wonder if it would help if I have like... What are they called? You have curtains, and then you have like these more like lacy things. And if I move that, maybe they'll be a bit more light. Not much. And I think it's much better. We're just going to have to go with the mood dark lighting. The next one is my... I didn't say. Spring Intentions wrap. I do want to try and finish that. Hopefully this year, or at least make a decent amount of progress that I should be able to finish it early next year. So I can wear it for next year's spring. This is the pillowcase I've been working on, which has seen no attention for the last few months because the warm weather went away and I went, buy summer yarn. But I do really want this pillowcase. So this is BC Garn Summer in Cashmere. My mum left me like 3 skeins or like 2 skeins and a bit. And I didn't know what to make with it. And I was like, okay, let's make a pillowcase. I figured out I needed more yarn, so I ordered more. And I'm just doing a broken rib stitch. And like I said, I just haven't really been working on it. I've just made it up. I did a little gauge swatch to see how many stitches I need to cast on for the pillow that I have, that I want to put inside. And once again, it's one of those things, I really do want this done because instead of it being a progress knit, it's more of like a process knit. It's more of a project one. Like I want it done. I want to be able to use this. So there is a little bit of like pressure coming from me to try and get this done. So I'm trying to just occasionally pick it up more often. And I'm holding the yarn double for this. It's like a 90% cotton, 10% cashmere, so it's really beautifully soft. But it's held double on quite small needles. I think I'm using like 3mm needles to get a dense fabric for the pillow. And it just makes it not fun to work with. Is the sun coming out? Just weird lighting. It's all good. Then a pair of socks. That hasn't been on my needles too long, and I've got one done already. These are the Lotus socks from 52 Weeks of Socks. And I am on the second one. My needles aren't currently on it. Shows you I've been working on it. So I'm about to start the actual like lace and cable design on this sock. And it's, like I said, not one I've been working on. Like as soon as I finished this, I did the cuff and the little bit of like striping that you see here. And then I kind of just left it because I had other things I wanted to finish first. But I think I should be able to get this done before the end of the year because if I actually focus on socks, I can typically get one done in a weekend. And especially with the second one, because I can count how many repeats to do before, you know, the heel, before the gusset is done, before the toe decreases start. It just really motivates me because I can see like this number that I can tally up, and it just helps keep me motivated. So I do think that one will be done relatively soon. This is a new cast on, which I mentioned in my planning, like autumn plan video. This is the Overthrow wrap by Hohi Locatelli. I don't have that much on it yet, because I just only recently started it really. And I'm just slowly making progress on it. The yarn I'm using is the Fiber Fox. I've got 5 skeins in different colours of the mohair, and this is her yak in a walnut colour. This mohair is called Wood Elf, I believe. And it's one I've wanted to make since last year. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to get it done for the end of the knit along. I don't really care if I don't. It was just nice to have a reason to cast it on, which was the knit along. And I'll just slowly, you know, make progress on this, but there's no real rush from my point of view, from my perspective, to, you know, get this done. And I am enjoying it. It's just currently at a stage where I'm not fully into the flow of it yet, and I'm hoping that will come soon. They're all hiding behind me. You cannot escape. Here we have the Laulu shawl by Sari Nordland. It's been slowly growing. This is definitely one of the projects I pick up on like a Sunday. And so I'm on chart 3 now, I think. And now I just have to kind of work increases until I'm at the point where I think I decide like that's big enough, like for half the length. I'm now gonna, you know, start working the decreases. It's slow going because it's a lot of like cables, there's a lot of charts you have to read, but it's not many stitches and it is fun. But once again, have to sit at my actual table with my chart laid out, and it just is a bit more involved, so it's not the easiest thing to just kind of pick up and randomly start knitting. But I do put in a row or two every now and then. The yarn is Sugar Baby Alpaca by Wool and the Gang, which I had left over from like other things I've knit, like kits and things from them, I think. I only have 2 skeins with me here, so I'm going to try and go until the midpoint until this runs out, and then second one for decreases. But I do have more in Austria, so I can make it bigger if I want. I just can't then finish it until I pick up more of that yarn. So we'll see. I mentioned this one earlier. This is my Sparky sweater. It's one of my other Make 9s that I currently have on the needle. And I was actually working on this a bit last night. Just felt inspired. I am using Vovo by Retrosario Rosa Pomar. This dark green is my main colour. This is my first contrast colour because I'm going to work through 3 different ones. Starting with this one and kind of working through to the other darker colours. I don't have very much. It's very slow going. But I really do love it. And it's so autumnal. And I think that's part of why I wanted to work on it again yesterday. But yeah, the forage is the one that's the closest to being done. Then I think I'll focus on this one while also occasionally working on the Satsuki. This didn't get any attention for quite a while because all I did was cast it on, do a few rounds of the colour work to make sure there is some contrast because I wasn't sure there would be. And it's not high, but it's kind of exactly what I was going for. I really like, I'm in a low contrast kind of phase right now. I'm going through that right now. So yeah, slow going, don't work on it. Like, I think I cast it on, worked the few rows of the colour work, then I put it on hold, and then I picked it up again yesterday. And I think I started the colour work back in August? Was it earlier? I can't even remember. But yeah, so slow going. And then, last project, is something I just out of the blue decided to make. I decided I didn't have enough blankets on the go. No, it's more of I've wanted to make like a coziest memories, one of those. They're like, I think they're called mitered square blankets. So this is how much I have. It's not a lot. 3 little squares. And I decided I only wanted to use hand dyed for this because it's held single, and I was like, you can really see each colour. And I decided instead of using like multiple different dyes, I was only going to use yarn from the Fibre Fox because I have a lot of her yarn. I'll have plenty of scraps as I start to work through the yarn I have in stash to be able to make this blanket. I won't just have like 1 square in each colour. I'm going to have multiple squares in each colour just to use them up. But these are currently the only scraps I've put in here because I have other ones, I think, but I'm currently just keeping them on the side in case I try to use them for like color work or something, because I have more of them left. So this is some Plumpy, where I made a pair of socks, for example. This is the yarn I used for my first lotus petal top, and that's all I had left. These ones, these two, I used for my arrow sweater, where I used like a lot of different Fiber Fox yarn that I had and like paired it with mohair and things like that. This is the leftover of the camel silk, baby camel, something like that. She doesn't carry this base right now. I don't know if she ever will again, but it's beautiful. But I used it to... Is this ever going to end? What is going on? I made this. This is one of the colours I used to make my Exordium shawl. That's all I had left. And then this is one of the colourways from my Cozy Classic Raglan. I use this for like the cuffs and just the ribbing, really. And so that's this colourway. That's the flax one. I think this one was Maleficent, which was used in my arrow sweater. And this is the Fellowship, which is the main colour I used for my Cozy Classic Raglan. So just one of those ones, kind of like the Battenberg, where, you know, occasionally I'll just be like, I will add a square to this. And it was just a nice... I saw everyone making these blankets and I was like, I want to know what it feels like to make one of these too. And I thought that would be perfect. And considering my obsession with Georgie's yarn, I thought it was perfect to have a blanket that was just Fiber Fox yarn. Let's ignore the fact I already have one of those blankets on the go. But this is a scrappy one instead of a planned one. So, you know, it's very different. So, that should be 32 projects. Like I said, could be wrong. And I've got those 3 other ones back in Austria. I talked about kind of my plans where I'd like to try and get the number down to below 30 before the end of the year. So that does include the 3 from Austria. So it's not like, oh, I'm at 32 already, so I just need to finish, you know, like 2 or 3. No, I'm officially at 35 projects. I need to finish 5 to 6 projects before the end of the year, which I will do. But I've also got plans to cast on a few new things as like presents. I've got some sample knitting. I've got at least one more test knit coming up, which I'll talk about in the future. But yeah, there's quite a few projects here where I'm like, I know I can finish them before the end of the year. No stress. It's all good. So I think that's doable. It's just whether things like my Make 9 will actually get done. I don't think they will, but the forager should be fine. So I hope it gave you some insight into like how many projects I have on the needles. The fact that there are quite a few that I only work on, you know, once or twice a year really currently, because I've got so many projects, and a lot of them are just kind of in rotation and get worked on maybe once a week. But more like I have like 10 projects where I switch between them every Sunday, so they don't always get worked on every week. It's more like once a month maybe. And then I've got my more like proper projects, which normally is about 10, that is the ideal number that I'd like to try and be able to reach. Hopefully by the end of next year, we'll see. I think that's still quite ambitious with everything I've got on my needles, everything I've still got coming up that I want to make over the next year. So we will have to see, but no, just hope it was interesting. Hope it was insightful. Hope you enjoyed all my whip shame and it maybe, you know, made you feel better about how many whips you have. And to be honest, I'm not actually embarrassed by this number. It's been higher before. I've been up to 40 before. It's been below 25 at one point last year, I think. And it's just, you know, it's just knitting. It's okay. It's just I'd like to try and, you know, focus now on getting a few of those whips done. So, I'm going to stop talking. I've done so much talking. That's everything. So thank you so much for watching, and you'll see a podcast video from me soon. I've got a lot to share. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye!